did want to thank Kizuna Across Cultures, the Japanese Embassy, and the Consulate in San Francisco for sponsoring this event. I actually have a huge debt to the Consulate in San Francisco because when I was a student at UC Berkeley, I went over to the consulate for an interview, and the result was I received a scholarship to go to Japan for 2 years of graduate study. So thank you so much, Consulate San Francisco. Just by way of brief introduction, I'm going to focus my comments on study abroad and careers in Japanese. But I have 3 times in my life participated in a study abroad program. I was a high school exchange student for 1 year, living with the Japanese family and attending a Japanese school. I was the only foreigner at the school, and no one in my Japanese family spoke English. I went to Japan with no Japanese, and after a year, had basic fluency because it was a survival situation. I went back to Japan for 1 year of college work through my college. UC Berkeley had an exchange program, so I studied at International Christian University for a year, and then finally I went to graduate school thanks to the Ministry of Education scholarship in a Japanese language program where I was the only American. There were 2 Australians, and the other 197 students were all Asian, and almost no one spoke English, so our common language was Japanese. So just a couple of observations about language study. Immersion programs are really important. So, studying in the US is wonderful and it's necessary, but going to Japan and immersing yourself in the culture is something that's very important. I'm seeing from the questions being asked, some people are concerned about some details about organizing their time in Japan. But let me assure you, Japanese people will be so nice and so friendly and so helpful to an American student who wants to go to Japan and study. They appreciate the effort we're making, and they are very helpful. Let me just give you one story in my personal experience. When I was a college junior in Japan, I lived in what they call a geshu in Japan. It was a elderly woman who ran a home for 3 students, and she fed us dinner every night. And she always served dinner when the NHK 7 p.m. news was on. And then at the end of the half-hour news show, she would pick a story that happened on the news and ask me my opinion about it. And when I gave her my opinion, she always took the opposite point of view and made me argue with her in Japanese. It took me about 6 months to realize she was just doing that intentionally, but it really did help my Japanese get a lot better by being forced to express myself and to make logical arguments in Japanese. But that's the sort of example of people who are just so friendly and so helpful in wanting you to improve your Japanese language skills. The second point I make about study abroad is just do it. Language learning gets harder and harder as you get older and older. And so the sooner you can go, the better in my judgment. So don't worry about all the potential obstacles. You can overcome those and just find your niche and go for it. Let me now talk a little bit about careers with Japanese. As Minister Miyake mentioned, Japan is an important security ally, and there is tremendous Japanese business involvement in the United States. As he mentioned, Japan is the largest investor of any country in the United States. We also have tremendous cooperation in STEM areas. I'll give you one example. NASA and JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, have a tremendous partnership, and they're right now partnering on the Artemis project to send people back to the moon. So for people who have a science or engineering background, there also are wonderful opportunities learning Japanese. Using Japanese. And finally, the strong people-to-people ties that we enjoy present tremendous opportunities. So there's jobs using Japanese language in almost any field you can imagine. I went into government service. People like Shanti are in the non-governmental sector working on policy issues. There are tremendous opportunities there, as I'm sure Shanti would agree. But also in business, if that's your interest, there are opportunities both with American and Japanese companies using for Americans who speak Japanese. Teaching, there's a shortage of Japanese teachers in the United States. So that's another opportunity, academia. And finally, I mentioned science and technology. And finally, the hospitality and travel industries. If you are interested in travel as a occupation, working for an airline, a hotel, a restaurant, a travel agent, tour guide, there are tremendous opportunities for Americans learning Japanese. So one thing that was mentioned earlier, which I agree with completely, is Japanese language study is important, but that shouldn't be unless you want to be an interpreter or a translator, that shouldn't be your sole focus. Having a skill and having Japanese is something that's really quite important. So my career advice for all of you, and this is based on personal experience, is out in the job market, when you're done being a student and trying to get a job, there is competition. And so you want to differentiate yourself from the other people so that you're the one that gets hired for the job that you want. And one good way to do this is having on your resume that you are fluent in Japanese, because that will distinguish you from many, many other people who are applying for the same job that you're applying for. In my case, when I joined the State Department, I wondered, why I had gotten hired. It was very competitive. And when I asked my career counselor, he sort of looked through my file and said, well, you speak Japanese and we need Japanese speakers. And so that's, I'm sure, the reason I got hired over other people who were very qualified, for the job. So anyway, I would encourage all of you to consider study abroad as a way of furthering your Japanese study. And I'm very glad later to answer all of your questions. I'm very happy to see so many people logging into this webinar. It shows how much interest there is in Japan, and I certainly would encourage you to pursue your studies going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Zumwalt. If you wouldn't mind hanging on for a moment, I'd love to ask you a question or two, if that's all right.
Sure, of course.
So, you've been in the US-Japan space for a long time, and the relationship, as we know, is very important now. But geopolitics change, and different regions or different countries become more, or I hate to say less important. And so someone who is maybe in middle school or high school, they're not entering the workforce for some time. So, I think that it doesn't matter how far away you are from entering the workforce, studying Japanese culture and language and having that interest is really important. But what would you say to someone who's maybe 10 years out from joining the workforce? How do we know that the Japan learning that language is still important for something we don't know 10 years from now?
Sure. I am confident that Japan will remain an important partner for the United States for a variety of reasons. Japan's a very developed economy. With Japanese companies are very active in the United States, and I don't think that is going to change because the United States is an attractive place for Japanese companies to come here. But also Japan has, tremendous system of universities, and so American counterparts will be interested in continuing to work together with Japanese in the area of science and technology. But the other area that I'm sure is going to continue is Japan has a very vibrant cultural scene, as you mentioned, with its Japanese popular culture, I think will remain very appealing to Americans and to people around the world. So I am confident that if someone is interested in Japan and they pursue their study of Japanese, they will find opportunities, say in 10 years when they're ready to enter the job market.
All right, thank you so much. And one last, if I can look, I've been looking at all the different questions that have been coming in, and we covered kind of business, tourism, and industry. But with your role at the Japan America Society for Washington, D.C., there's lots of opportunities for cultural engagement with Japan. So maybe if you could just speak about those types of opportunities that exist both for nourishing the hunger that people might have for engaging with Japan while they're here in the US before they get to Japan, but also kind of prospective jobs.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for mentioning the Japan America Society of Washington, D.C. We're a very active organization. We do, by the way, have some scholarships for local people who live in the Washington, D.C. area for either a semester or a year abroad in Japan. So if you are interested in a scholarship, please visit our website and you can get information. I think it's a little, we just awarded scholarships for this coming academic year, but certainly if you're interested in studying a year from now, that's an opportunity. Another opportunity is the Japan America Society has many young volunteers, and it's a great way to network and meet other young people who, like yourselves, are interested in Japan. So if you're interested in either an internship or volunteer opportunities, please again come to our website and take a look. And finally, we have a newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks with information about activities related to Japan in the Washington, D.C. area. And for example, we advertise this webinar in our newsletter. So if you want more information about cultural activities in the Washington, D.C. area, it's an online newsletter. You don't have to be a resident here, but please come to our website and sign up. We'll be happy to provide you with information about opportunities for cultural and other events related to Japan in the Washington, D.C. area.
And thank you. And yes, also for those who are not in this area, Japan America societies are across the United States. So you can always look in your area to see if they're there, but they do offer a lot of remote and virtual options as well. So it doesn't really matter where actually in the world you are, you could still benefit from that. Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Zumwalt.